Welcome to DM Tales. Before we dive into the story, please subscribe. The morning began like any other. Quiet, ordinary, almost gentle. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of the bedroom, settling softly on the walls as if afraid to disturb the peace. The house was awake but unhurried, breathing in slow rhythms. Somewhere down the hall, a clock ticked steadily, each second falling into place like it always had. Maya stood in the laundry room, folding clothes with practiced ease. Her hands moved automatically, shirt to square, sleeves tucked in, edges aligned. It was the kind of routine that required no thought, only memory. She had been doing this for years. The twins' clothes were stacked neatly on one side. Small socks, school uniforms, pajamas still faintly scented with soap. On the other side were her husband's shirts. Crisp, expensive, still smelling faintly of his cologne. She hesitated over one of them. Something about the fabric felt colder than usual. Maya frowned, brushing the thought aside. She had learned to distrust unease. It often arrived uninvited and never explained itself. Life, after all, had been good. Predictable. Secure. At least, that was what she told herself. From the kitchen came the distant hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed. The world continued without urgency. Then the door slammed. The sound cracked through the apartment like thunder, sharp and violent, rattling the frames on the wall. Maya flinched, her hands tightening around the shirt she was folding. She froze. Her heart stuttered once, then began to race. That was loud, she muttered, forcing a small, nervous laugh. Maybe the wind. Maybe he was in a hurry. She stepped out of the laundry room. He was standing in the living room, still holding the door handle. His face was unreadable, too calm, too composed. He wasn't removing his jacket. He wasn't loosening his tie. He wasn't staying. Maya, he said. Her name sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Flat. Distant. Yes, she replied, though something inside her had already begun to sink. He exhaled, as if preparing for a presentation he had practiced too many times. We need to talk. The room felt suddenly smaller. The walls pressed inward, closing space she had never noticed before. Can it wait? She asked. I'm almost done with. No, his voice was firm. Final. It can't. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Maya noticed details she had never paid attention to before. The way he wouldn't meet her eyes, the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed as though rehearsing restraint. I'm leaving, he said. The words landed without ceremony. No build-up. No cushioning. She blinked. Leaving where? He looked past her, toward the window. I'm moving out. The sentence didn't make sense. It hovered in the air, incomplete. Why? She whispered. He turned back to her then, and his expression hardened, not with anger, but with something colder. Detachment. There's someone else. The world tilted. Maya felt it physically, like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. She reached for the back of a chair, steadying herself. Someone else, she repeated. She's younger, he added, as though explaining a simple fact. Things are easier with her. Less complicated. Easier. The word burned. And the children? Maya asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it steady. They'll be fine, he said quickly. I'll provide what's necessary. Necessary. She searched his face for something. Regret. Guilt. Hesitation, but found nothing familiar. This man looked like her husband, sounded like him, but felt like a stranger who had memorized his lines. When? She asked. Today. The room spun. Today. I've already arranged everything. Of course he had. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Questions crowded her mind. How long? How could you? What did I do? But none escaped. Shock had wrapped itself tightly around her chest, stealing breath and language alike. He glanced at his watch. I need to go, he said. I didn't want this to be messy. Messy. Maya laughed then. A short, broken sound that startled even her. Messy, she echoed. You're destroying our life. He frowned, irritation flickering briefly across his face. You're being dramatic. That was the moment something cracked. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to be felt. Without another word, he picked up his bag and walked past her. The door closed behind him with a quiet finality this time, as if the earlier slam had been unnecessary. The echo lingered long after the sound disappeared. Maya stood there, unmoving. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time loosened its grip on meaning. Eventually, she sank onto the couch. Her hands shook as she pressed them into her lap. The room looked exactly the same, but it was no longer hers. Something essential had been removed. Her phone buzzed. A message from the bank. Transaction declined. She stared at the screen. Another buzz. Account access restricted. Her stomach dropped. She tried to call him. Straight to voicemail. She opened her contacts, scrolling instinctively. Friends. Family. Names she had trusted for years. She dialed one. No answer. Another. Busy. By evening, the light had faded from the apartment. Shadows pooled in corners where warmth used to live. The twins sat quietly at the table, sensing more than they understood. "Where's Daddy?" one of them asked softly. Maya swallowed hard. "He had to go," she said. For a while, they accepted the answer with the fragile trust of children, but their eyes stayed on her, watching, learning. As night fell, the silence grew louder. Maya stood in the center of the living room, arms wrapped around herself. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window, smaller somehow, less certain. In the space of one day, she had lost more than a husband. She had lost security, stability, identity. She had been abandoned. And as the quiet deepened, another truth settled painfully into place. She hadn't just been left. She had been erased. Morning came without permission. It arrived thin and pale, slipping through the curtains like an intruder who didn't care that the house had not slept. Maya lay awake on the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling, every muscle tight as if bracing for another blow. She had not cried. Not yet. Shock had wrapped itself around her emotions like armor. Heavy, numbing, exhausting. The twins were still asleep in their room. Their soft breathing was the only sound that reminded her the world had not completely ended. Maya sat up slowly. Her body felt heavier than it should have, as though gravity had increased overnight. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the counter where yesterday's breakfast plates still sat untouched. She reached for the kettle. Nothing happened. The electricity was still on, she realized, but the gas had been disconnected. She checked her phone again, heart pounding. More messages. More quiet confirmations of what she already knew. Bills overdue. Payments canceled. Accounts frozen. He hadn't just left. He had planned. Maya pressed her palm against the counter, breathing slowly. Panic clawed at her chest, sharp and insistent, but she forced it down. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Not with children watching. She found bread in the cupboard, 2 slices left. She divided them carefully, spreading the last of the peanut butter thin enough to pretend it was enough. When the twins shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from their eyes, she smiled. It felt unnatural, like wearing someone else's face. "Breakfast," she said lightly. They ate without complaint. Children adapted faster than adults, she thought. Or maybe they trusted that adults knew what they were doing. She wished she did. After they left for school, Maya began inventorying her life. It felt strange, walking from room to room with a notebook, writing down what could be sold. Jewelry she rarely wore. Electronics. Designer bags she once considered symbols of arrival. Each item carried a memory, trips, gifts, moments of pride. Now they were lifelines. The first sale happened that afternoon. Cash in hand, she felt a flicker of relief and a sting of humiliation. She had never imagined needing to bargain over her own belongings. By the end of the week, the apartment looked emptier, lighter, as if it, too, was shedding illusions. Nights were the hardest. When the twins slept, the silence grew teeth. Maya lay awake listening to the hum of the city outside. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the floor, the distant siren, the neighbors' laughter drifting through the walls. Her thoughts refused to rest. How long had he been planning this? How long had everyone else known? How had she not seen it? Fear whispered relentlessly, "This is the end. You won't survive this." Some nights, she almost believed it. But morning always came. And with it, responsibility. She learned how to stretch meals. Rice became 2 days instead of 1. Vegetables were chopped smaller. Soup was watered down and seasoned carefully to hide the truth. She walked instead of taking taxis. She avoided mirrors. The twins noticed the changes. "Why don't you eat, Mama?" One of them asked one evening. I already did, she lied gently, smiling through the tightness in her throat. They watched her more closely now. Children sensed fractures even when words were hidden. Their laughter softened. Their questions multiplied. Maya felt guilt coil inside her chest, heavy and sharp. She hated that they were learning hardship this early. Hated that she couldn't shield them the way she once had. But she also noticed something else. They were still laughing. Still hugging her before bed. Still believing she could fix anything. That belief became her anchor. One afternoon, after another fruitless job application, Maya sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry for the first time. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quiet tears soaking into the collar of her shirt. I'm tired, she whispered to the empty room. The words felt like confession and prayer all at once. She wiped her face before the twins came home. That night, after they fell asleep, Maya sat in the dark living room, hands folded in her lap. Her reflection stared back at her from the blank television screen. Eyes sunken, shoulders hunched, but still standing. Broken? Yes. She felt it in the ache of her bones, in the way her breath sometimes caught unexpectedly, in the constant tension coiled beneath her skin. But breathing. Still breathing. Every morning, she woke up. Every day, she did what needed to be done. No applause. No reassurance. Just quiet endurance. And though she didn't know it yet, endurance was the first muscle she was rebuilding. The idea did not arrive with fireworks or clarity. It came quietly, almost shyly, on an afternoon that looked like every other difficult day Maya had learned to endure. Rain pressed softly against the windows, blurring the city into streaks of gray. The twins were at school. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional drip from a leaky faucet she kept meaning to fix. Maya sat on the floor of the bedroom with a small pile of clothes around her, items she hadn't yet sold, pieces too worn to bring much money but too necessary to throw away. One of the twins' shirts had torn at the seam. Maya sighed, holding it up. Buying a new one wasn't an option. She reached for her sewing kit, a small box she'd owned for years but rarely opened. It had always lived in the background of her life, quiet and overlooked. She threaded the needle with practiced ease. Her fingers moved slowly at first, stiff from disuse. But as the thread slipped through fabric, something in her relaxed. The rhythm was familiar, comforting. Each stitch brought order to damage. She finished the repair and held the shirt up to the light. It looked better than before. Maya paused. She turned the shirt over, smoothing the fabric thoughtfully. Then she reached for another item, a dress she once loved but no longer wore. The hem had frayed slightly. On impulse, she trimmed it shorter, reshaped the line, added a subtle detail at the waist. When she stepped back, she felt something stir in her chest. Not joy, recognition. She remembered now, late nights years ago, altering her own clothes when money was tight, the compliments she used to receive, the casual way people once said, "You should do this professionally." Life had moved too fast then. Success had worn another face. She had forgotten this part of herself because she hadn't needed it. Until now. That evening, she laid the altered pieces on the bed and took photos with her phone. The lighting was imperfect. The background plain. She hesitated before posting them online, heart thudding. No expectations, she told herself. Just trying. She uploaded the photos and closed the app immediately, as though it might bite. An hour later, her phone buzzed. A comment. "This is beautiful." Maya stared at the screen, pulse quickening. She refreshed the page. Another notification. "Do you sell these?" Her breath caught. She typed a response slowly, hands trembling. "Not officially, but I can." The reply came quickly. "I'd love to buy one." The first sale wasn't large. It barely covered groceries for a week. But when the payment notification appeared, Maya sat down hard on the couch, her heart pounding as if she had run a long distance. It wasn't the money. It was proof. She stayed up late that night, sketching ideas on scraps of paper. Nothing elaborate. Just improvements. Adjustments. Possibilities. Her mind buzzed with thoughts she hadn't allowed herself in months. The twins noticed the change before she did. "You're smiling again," one of them said over breakfast, squinting at her suspiciously. Maya paused, surprised. She touched her face, as if confirming it was true. "Am I?" she asked softly. They nodded. Orders trickled in, slowly at first. One here, one there. Each one felt unreal. Maya worked at the kitchen table after the twins slept, fingers aching, eyes burning, but her exhaustion was different now. It carried purpose. She learned as she went. How to price her work. How to respond professionally. How to photograph better, package carefully, communicate clearly. Mistakes were frequent and humbling, but each one taught her something valuable. There were days when no orders came. Those days hurt more than she expected. Fear returned then, whispering that this was foolish, temporary, a distraction from the truth that she was still broken and alone. On those days, Maya folded laundry, cleaned the apartment, and reminded herself that beginnings were rarely loud. One evening, she received a message from someone she didn't know. "I've been watching your work for a while. There's something special about it." Maya read it twice. Special. She leaned back in her chair, eyes closing briefly. For the first time since the door had closed, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss. Hope did not arrive as joy. It arrived as possibility. And possibility, fragile, quiet, and stubborn, was enough to keep her going. Success did not announce itself. It crept in quietly, disguised as exhaustion. Maya's days began earlier now. Before sunrise, while the city still slept, she slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen, careful not to wake the twins. She brewed the cheapest coffee she could find and stood by the window, letting the steam warm her face as she reviewed orders on her phone. There were more of them than there had been yesterday. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to notice. By the time the twins were dressed and fed, Maya had already cut fabric, answered messages, and written down a list of things she needed but couldn't yet afford. She walked them to school, listening to their chatter with half her mind while the other half planned the day's work. Her apartment had transformed. The dining table was no longer a place for meals. It was a workspace crowded with scissors, pins, measuring tape, and half-finished garments. Thread colors lined the windowsill like tiny promises. The living room smelled faintly of fabric and steam. She worked while they slept. That was the rule she had made for herself. When the twins were awake, she was present. When they slept, she became relentless. Nights blurred together, packaging orders under a dim lamp, rewriting product descriptions, teaching herself marketing through free tutorials and late-night articles. Her fingers were often sore. Her eyes burned. Sleep became something she borrowed in short, uneven installments. Some nights, she wondered if she was failing in a new way. But then a message would arrive. "I've never worn anything that felt so personal. Thank you for making this. Please tell me you're restocking." Rejection arrived too. Emails that began politely and ended with "We've decided not to proceed." Influencers who read her messages and never replied. Opportunities that felt close enough to touch and then vanished. Each rejection stung. But Maya no longer let them stop her. She had learned something vital in survival mode. Stopping was more dangerous than trying. The brand began to grow. Not explosively, not dramatically, but steadily, like a heartbeat strengthening over time. People shared her work. A small blog featured her designs. Orders doubled, then doubled again. With growth came noise. People who had disappeared when she needed help began to reappear. Old acquaintances sent casual messages. "I always believed in you," as if history could be rewritten with emojis and compliments. One former friend asked for free items for exposure. Maya stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Thank you for your interest. My work is not free." She surprised herself with how calm she felt pressing send. Another person asked for a favor. Then another. Some hinted at connections they could offer. If she just made an exception. Maya learned to say no. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was firm. The twins adjusted to the changes, too. They learned to do homework quietly at the table while she worked. They learned that Mama was tired, but smiling. That the house, though small and imperfect, was alive with effort. One night, after putting them to bed, Maya stood alone in the kitchen. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window. Eyes sharper now, posture straighter. She looked different. Not happier. Not yet. Stronger. She thought of the people who had laughed when she struggled. Who whispered when she sold her belongings. Who assumed she would fade quietly. They slept easily at night. She worked. And with every stitch, every risk, every long hour, She rose. Unseen, uncelebrated, unstoppable. Maya had learned to recognize the sound of success before it fully arrived. It wasn't applause or celebration. It was disturbance. The first sign came in the form of a familiar name lighting up her phone one afternoon while she stood in line at the fabric market. She stared at the screen, her fingers tightening around the handle of her bag. Her ex-husband. She didn't answer. She slipped the phone into her pocket and focused on the scent of cloth, the murmur of vendors, the rhythm of bargaining voices around her. Her life had become loud in a new way. Full, demanding, real. There was no room for ghosts. The phone buzzed again later. Then again that evening. I heard about your brand. You've done well for yourself. We should talk. The words felt strange. Detached. As if he were commenting on a stranger's achievements. Maya stared at the messages in silence. The old version of herself might have rushed to respond, eager for explanation, closure, validation. She was not that woman anymore. Days passed before she replied. I'm busy. The response came quickly. I won't take much of your time. They met in a quiet cafe, neutral ground. Maya arrived early, as she always did now. She chose a seat near the window and ordered tea, hands steady. When he walked in, she barely recognized him. The confidence he once carried so effortlessly was gone. His suit looked worn. His smile uncertain. He scanned the room before spotting her, surprise flickering across his face. You look different, he said as he sat her down. So do you, Maya replied evenly. They exchanged pleasantries that felt unnecessary. He spoke first, as though relieved to finally release words he had been carrying. I didn't expect things to turn out this way, he said. Maya lifted her cup, unhurried. Neither did I. He shifted in his seat. I made mistakes. The words hovered between them, waiting to be received. Maya nodded once. You did. He looked at her then, really looked, as though searching for the woman he remembered, the one who needed him, who waited, who forgave easily. She didn't work out, he said quietly. There it was. The explanation he had rehearsed. The justification he believed might reopen doors. Maya felt something surprising rise in her chest. Not anger. Relief. I'm sorry things didn't go the way you hoped, she said honestly. But my life is full now. His expression faltered. I miss the children. You can see them, Maya replied. Through proper arrangements. Not here. Not now. Not like this. Silence settled between them, thick but controlled. He studied her, perhaps realizing for the first time that the power dynamic had shifted. I always knew you were strong, he said softly. Maya smiled, not out of gratitude, but closure. You didn't. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. He didn't stop her. Outside, the air felt lighter. Old friends reached out next. Apologies arrived wrapped in nostalgia and guilt. Some were sincere. Some were convenient. Maya listened. She forgave. But she did not forget. Forgiveness, she had learned, did not require access. It did not demand reconciliation. It was something she gave herself, a release from carrying what no longer served her. That night, she sat on the balcony while the twins laughed inside, their voices floating out like music. The city stretched before her, bright and alive. The past had knocked. She had answered. And then, gently, firmly, she had closed the door again. 5 years passed quietly. Not in a blur, not in a rush, but in layers, each one built carefully on the last. Maya learned that time didn't heal everything on its own. Healing happened when she chose herself again and again, even on days when it was inconvenient, exhausting, or lonely. On the morning of the anniversary, the day the door had closed, she woke before the alarm. Old habits lingered, but fear no longer lived in them. She moved through her home with ease, barefoot on cool floors, the city waking slowly beneath her windows. This home was different now. Larger, brighter, filled with warmth that didn't depend on anyone's permission. The twins were taller than she remembered noticing. Their voices deeper, their laughter louder. They moved through the space with confidence, unafraid to take up room in the world. Maya watched them from the kitchen doorway, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. Not pain, but pride. You ready? One of them asked. Always, she replied, smiling. Later that afternoon, she stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The wind lifted her hair gently, carrying the hum of traffic, music, life. Below, buildings reflected sunlight, and among them, her company's logo glowed softly, a mark she once could not imagine leaving on the world. She thought back to the woman she had been. The one who folded laundry in silence. The one who stared at frozen bank accounts and empty cupboards. The one who breathed through fear because stopping felt more dangerous. That woman had not disappeared. She had transformed. Maya's phone buzzed with congratulations, meeting reminders, invitations she no longer chased but chose. She turned it face down and rested her hands on the railing, breathing deeply. She was not here because someone returned. She was here because she stayed. The twins joined her, leaning against her sides, familiar and solid. She wrapped an arm around each of them, grounding herself in their presence. "You did this," one of them said quietly. Maya shook her head. "We did." As the sun dipped lower, the city softened into gold. The past no longer pulled at her. It sat where it belonged. Behind her, a chapter closed without bitterness. She had been abandoned. Yes, but she had never been weak. Never invisible. Never finished. She had built something no one could take from her. Not success, not peace, not herself. Abandoned, unbroken was not just her story. It was her victory.